Well, good morning, friends. It's great to see you all. Welcome to our first week of Growth Hour. You are in the class, the least of these, and I'm glad that you're here to join me this morning. I'm going to jump right into our material for today because I have a propensity to be long-winded, and we need to make sure we cover. We only got 4 weeks for this series of Growth Hour sessions as well, so it's already kind of compacted to get through some of the material. But I realize even as we begin this morning, an introduction may be in order. Not everybody here, I've had the opportunity to meet. I did teach a growth hour maybe about 18 months ago or so on marriage, and some of you may have participated in that one. But for those that don't know who I am, my name is Cameron Rebarczyk. My wife Abby and I have been attending Hope Church now for about 3 years or so. We're the ones with 4 girls, and so we got the parade of ladies that come in each week. But for the first 10 years of our marriage, my wife and I served in Janesville as family life pastors on staff at a church, and I oversaw our family ministries, discipleship ministries, marriage ministries, and that's kind of why I taught a marriage growth hour first. And then about 5 years ago or so, I felt that the Lord was leading me in another direction in ministry, and I took a position as a spiritual welfare and mission advancement manager at Cedar Crest in Janesville. The title is a mouthful, but basically I serve our residents as the chaplain. There's a few extra things thrown in there as well. If you're unfamiliar in Janesville, Cedar Crest is the largest continuum of care facility in southern Wisconsin, and that means that we serve residents across a variety of life stages. So we have independent living apartments and cottages, and then we also have skilled nursing and rehabilitation centers, assisted living and memory care units. Some of these residents are going to be long-term, and then others are there for maybe just a week or two, recovering from a procedure and an injury. Some of them will just come in seeking respite for a period of time. And on any given day, kind of across our campus, we have maybe about 350 residents who call Cedar Crest their home, even if that's temporarily. I sometimes say tongue-in-cheek with those that I'm visiting and interacting with that I think Cedar Crest is the best place no one wants to be. And we try to make it feel like home, even though I realize you may really want to get back home, right? Well, as a full-time chaplain at Cedar Crest, a huge part of my role there is to be a tangible presence, to be a ministry there for our residents. And so I lead worship services and Bible studies for all of our areas of living throughout the week. I offer grief and end-of-life support to families, general life counseling and visitation to our residents, and also there to support our staff as well. And you can imagine practically to achieve that by myself for all 300 plus residents and our 200 plus staff members, I can't do that by myself, right? And that's just Cedar Crest. There's a lot of other facilities, a lot of other communities like ours that don't even have the role of chaplain, or if they do, it's a part-time role, and maybe a minister is stopping by periodically throughout the week to try to meet some of those needs. And so I realize it's my occupation as a chaplain to serve in all of those roles. But you're here this morning because it is our calling as a church to fill the ministry of visitation, to be that presence. And one of the things, again, that I frequently share with our residents is that my desire as a chaplain is never to substitute the local church's presence in their lives, but to supplement it. And I'm incredibly encouraged when I see a resident's church body continuing to love and to support them with the ministry of presence. One of the things that I love about our church here at Hope is I see our pastors coming to Cedar Crest and interacting with some of our church members. I know Casey was just there Thursday interacting, caring, and loving on our church family. I also have to confess, I get to see the other side of that. And it can be really disheartening, and it's frankly all too common to see residents like ours who are completely forgotten by their church body. I'm not joking when I say that I've had way more than just one resident share with me that when their pastor does visit, he refers to them by the wrong name. Right? And he doesn't even know me, okay? And so we have to do better than that. And so even as we start this morning, I want to kind of have a little bit of discussion as we dive in, because I think we all know, like, visitation is an important role of ministry. It's something that we need to do as a church, but it also can be hard. There's some obstacles and hurdles, some challenges sometimes when it comes to actually making a visit. And so I'm just going to open it up here. The first question I wanted to ask you guys this morning: what have you observed to be an obstacle, a challenge when making a visit? And that could be whether it's in a hospital, maybe it's in a home, a facility like ours, some other context. But what have maybe been some challenges and obstacles that you have encountered or heard, faced in making visitations? Marshall. Okay. Okay. So Marcia said, maybe the fear of having a topic of conversation that's not relevant and not meaningful. And I think just in general, just what do I say, right? What are we going to talk about? And especially sometimes you might be going to visit someone, you're like, I don't really even know that person. I have no idea what I'm going to do in those moments, right? Any other challenges or obstacles anyone wants to share? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it can be incredibly intimidating. And then sometimes, yeah, I think you hit on another thing. They're like, I got to fill this time. And you try to, I think another thing is like, how long should my visit be? I don't want to be in and out in a way that isn't a meaningful visit. I don't want to overstay my welcome, but I don't know what to do with the time or what is an appropriate amount of time. And again, it's just easier maybe if I don't go. Yeah. 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 Exactly. And you're right, though. It can be a challenge. When is a good time to come? Again, a facility like ours, there's all sorts of activities that are scheduled for the residents. And then you have maybe doctors, nurses, therapy that are coming in and out, and they're tired. And so they're sleeping. And you don't know if they're sleeping well at night. So, like, do I want to wake them or should I allow them to rest? Maybe a meal is coming. They have other visitors who are coming. And you're trying to factor all of that in. You're like, am I a nuisance? Am I being a burden, an annoyance to you, or is this actually valuable, right? Anyone else? Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so then we have all of the kind of the medical obstacles there, whether that would be maybe they're facing dementia, Alzheimer's, and trying to steer those conversations. How do I converse there when maybe the conversation isn't based in reality, and having those conversations. Sometimes I don't even know if I'm coming in, if I'm going to have a resident or an individual who is conscience aware. Maybe you're not even sure of their medical status. And then you have to meet family. I'm going to throw that one in there too. So you're like, who else is going to be in this room? Like, it was already intimidating just to come and visit this individual. And now there's like a family here, and I'm trying to meet with all of them and meet their needs too in that moment, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like the time commitment. Am I just going to have to do this one time, or am I now on the hook? Like, am I the one that's going to have to be here week in and week out, maybe multiple times a week? Like, what is their expectation for the frequency of these visits, right? And is it always going to be me that has to do that? And you're trying to factor that into your life as well, right? Yeah, go ahead. Mm. Sure, yeah. Yeah, sometimes things don't move at the speed that you're anticipating. And yeah, and waiting that one out, knocking on a door, and you're like, are they there? Did they forget? Yeah, absolutely. There can be all sorts of challenges and all sorts of obstacles. And then sometimes what we do is we convince ourselves it might just be best if I don't, if I don't visit. I don't want to cause more harm. I don't want to do more damage. And maybe it'd be best if I stayed away. And I do hope to, in the next 3 weeks after this, to try to address some of those challenges, try to give some practical tips as to how we can make visitation effective and meaningful. But today, with our time that we have, I want to kind of back up first, because we do need to recognize that visitation ministry is a call of God. And as such, I think it requires for us to start with a theology of visitation. Because any call into Christian service is going to require some theological perception, some motivation, because it is what provides the foundation and the stability that shapes our approach. And so today, before we talk about what we are going to do at any singular visit that we make, we really need to discuss why we are making the visit in the first place. And I think sometimes we get that order flipped, like, I don't know what to do. And I think we really just first need to address, well, why are we doing it to begin with? Why do we need to focus on the ministry of visitation? And we might take it for granted that people see the value and the importance of visiting, but that's not always the case. I also would observe that while many people might acknowledge that it's important, they might not understand why it's important for them to be involved in visitation. They say, I think the church should be a part of that, but me? I don't know if I am the one to go and make the visit. And I can assure you that it is vitally important to those in need of a visit. I came across a post on an online forum that I think echoes the sentiment of a lot of people who go unvisited. I'm just going to read it real quickly here. This individual posted this. He said, I just got home from 8 days in the hospital. I had to have surgery on my arm to remove a bone infection. It was a serious surgery, but I'm okay. I serve at my church. I tithe. Lots of people like me. But not one of them came to visit me in those 8 days. And I don't want to be offended because I know the poison that is, but they've visited others, so why not me? I don't know how to feel about this. I want to be angry, I want to be hurt, and at the same time, I don't want to give the enemy a foothold. Now, the issue with this, of course, it may not have been intentional by that church, right? There's a number of reasons that this might have occurred. And in the midst of all of the things within the life of the church, I find that visitation can easily be neglected. And so I want to offer that visitation shouldn't just be something that we do. It really ought to be a priority in what we do. Why? Because it's biblical, right? I'm going to rattle off a few verses for your consideration. James 5:14, we're exhorted for those who are sick to call upon the elders of the church to pray over them, right? In fact, non-elders were encouraged to pray in a similar way as well. It's not a priority just for pastors, just for leaders within the church. It's meant for all who love souls. That's how Spurgeon puts it. All who love souls should want to make visitation a priority. And then it was Jesus who taught and modeled this practice of caring for the sick. He indicated it was a primary way that we show love, not just to our brother, but to God when we love one another. The apostles followed that pattern of caring for the sick. We're told widows, especially, ought to be cared for. And then caring for the sick was just one aspect of caring for souls, something that leaders are going to have to give an account for. And so look, visiting the sick is also an incredible opportunity to minister to and to love our brothers and sisters in Christ. I have a quote on the handout today, and if you didn't get it coming in, make sure you grab one on the way out. But Charles Spurgeon once said this. He said, I venture to say that the greatest earthly blessing that God can give to any one of us is health, with the exception of sickness. Sickness has frequently been of more use to the saints of God than health has. That is a challenging perspective. There's a spiritual attentiveness, though, that accompanies sickness, that often fades when we are in good health. I had a privilege of sitting with a short-term resident a little while back. She had gone through a debilitating stroke. Her speech was very slow. She was immobile. She had strong faith. And I was just challenged in my visits with her where she was just sharing that now she has been forced to slow down and to listen more than she speaks. And she's been listening to God and the blessing that the stroke has been to her. That's a challenging perspective. She would not want to go through it again, but here she is, and she realizes that she needed to slow down and hear the voice of God, something that she was oblivious to when she had her health. That's Spurgeon's point. It presents to us this unique opportunity to share the gospel. Another chaplain once said something that has stuck with me. He said, always show up for death. It's a privilege for which there is no encore. And I felt that. It's a heavy moment, and again, a moment that I've never been prepared for coming into that room. But it is a privilege to be invited into the intimacy of that moment with a family and to minister and to share the gospel. Visitation is not just a unique opportunity to minister, though. It's also a unique opportunity to be ministered to. We should never view visitation as something that we have to do. We really need to go into it with the mindset, this is something I get to do. It's not just that they need the ministry of having been visited by someone. It's that you need to experience the ministry of being the visitor. Okay? It does you well to visit someone. And there are also a lot of practical reasons for you to consider a visitation. For example, I've listed a few here. They're likely lonely. There are approximately 2 million older Americans who are completely or mostly homebound, and another 5.5 million who are semi-homebound, which means that they can leave home, but they require some assistance to do so. And studies have shown that 40% of people with debilitating or chronic illness have reported loneliness and social isolation. 63% of chronically ill patients reported a deeper sense of loneliness after their diagnosis. That same survey indicated 73% have their daily activities and self-care impacted by their loneliness. Even for those who may be younger or for whom those things are not true, who may be, as in the case of that friend that I shared from the internet post, in an extended hospital stay, that sudden change, that disruption to your life is incredibly isolating. And when you take the time to visit and to love and to befriend and to help them in their distress, it is a reflection of the very character of God. It's an expression of loving what he loves. There's another practical reason, not just that they're lonely, but also I can assure you of this one. They need Jesus too, right? They need Jesus. C.S. Lewis once observed this. He said, we are like children thinking our toys will make us happy and that the whole world is our nursery, but something must drive us out of that nursery and into the lives of others, and that something is suffering. To say it again, there is something about the realities of aging and the realities of our pain and of our suffering that make us more attentive to the things of God. And becoming dependent upon others gives people a chance to really rethink what is important. One of the great mission fields available to us is not just overseas, it's within those lonely living rooms. It's within the quiet walls of a care facility. Those are mission fields. And then another practical reason I'm gonna give you this morning for visitation, and especially of the elderly that I have come to learn, is that they are probably a lot wiser than you are, right? Yeah, your visits are for them, but as I've been saying, to some degree, they're for you too. And so when I spend time with our residents and consider that they have dealt with war, they've dealt with heartbreak, they've dealt with illness and conflict in ways that I have not, and yet they're unfailingly cheerful, and they come out smiling, that humbles me. I'm thinking about a dear resident who just passed about a week ago, 103 years old. What other opportunity and privilege do I have to sit across the table from a 103-year-old and just, what have you learned? What have you seen, right? There's so much to glean from those conversations. And I'm reminded they were once my age, and Lord willing, one day I will be where they are. And there is a kind of practical wisdom that I take away from every one of those visits. I think that's why Solomon writes in Proverbs, gray hair is a crown of splendor. It is attained in the way of righteousness. And so before I share a few more thoughts this morning, I want to pause for another question here. Some of you undoubtedly have made some visits, right? We spoke about the challenges and the obstacles, but I'm curious about the benefits that some of you maybe have encountered as well. So what lessons, what benefits have you received from a visitation that you may have made? Anybody have anything that comes to mind? Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, it takes the focus off of ourselves. Even if for a small microcosm of time, it makes us less selfish. It reminds us that we're a community of people and not just individuals, right? We're a body, the body of Christ. Yeah. Anyone else? Benefits? Please. Yeah. Yeah. Making those visits in the hospitals and the encouragement that you bring and that you take away, right? Yeah. Yeah, nothing like it. Yeah, Tracy.
I think during my season of life, I can often make the excuse that, well, I have kids, and it's really cumbersome because it is cumbersome to visit with kids, especially older people, because they have lots of knickknacks and things we don't have in our house. So my anxiety usually goes through the roof. But they are so patient with my kids, and they just enjoy my kids' presence, even though I sometimes think of it as like a burden going in there, like I have to worry about where their hands are going to be. Are they touching stuff that could be broken? But I'm always blessed because they see it as a joy, and it kind of reminds me that like kids are, yes, a joy even when you're in the thick of it.
Yeah. Yeah, kids can be a joy, and sometimes we think that they might cause more disruption, but really they're welcome. And I experience that a lot. My residents scold me all the time for not bringing my family to the facility. I'm like, I don't know if that's even allowable all the time. I'm working, right? But they want the kids there. And so I do get the opportunity to bring them, not nearly as much as I would like, or certainly not as much as the residents would like, but they long for that. Absolutely. Anyway, yes, Mark. Yeah, right. Yeah, the stories that you get to hear, and just tell me a little bit about yourself, which is a lot of fun because sometimes you might be going to someone that you thought you knew, right? And you discover something new, and that's always a joy right there. And then again, somebody you don't know. And we're pretty good at talking about ourselves. So that's always a great way actually to say, what am I going to say? Well, just ask about them. Learn to ask questions and let them do the talking and learn something else. And they really light up. And by the way, not to get too ahead of ourselves, that's one of my favorite things to do with when I'm dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's is redirection, right? And so they might say, well, my husband is coming. It's like, well, her husband has passed and he's not. So I go, well, tell me more about your husband. How the two of you meet? Right? And so I'm not going to correct that, what do you guys have planned? And they'll share something, and light up. And it's a joy. And you get to learn about them and the smiles that they bring, right? Yeah. 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 Those final moments, they're heavy, but to know that they're crossing that finish line, right? And they're doing so with hope. They've completed their race, and that inspires hope in us, and encourages us in our races of faith as well. Absolutely. I thought I saw another. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, music, a simple hymn, and there's also some really practical resources I'll share there that, especially for Alzheimer's and dementia, there's some great online resources of music tailored for that. But yeah, it's amazing. You can be having conversations. They might ask my name, 10 times in the matter of a minute, but you play that familiar hymn, or let's say the Lord's Prayer, and it all comes back. And it's a beautiful moment. It is one of my favorite. My favorite is my Friday mornings in our memory care, and listening to all of them worship and the Lord with one another. And it's really a beautiful moment. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's an incredibly humbling thing when you come in again, you're thinking, maybe I'm here to minister, they need me. And to an extent that's true, but then you walk out and you're like, man, I've been blessed. And it gives us such perspective, like, because here they are in their suffering or in pain or in their loneliness, but full of joy and hope and faith. And that is such a perspective for me then to bring when I leave that moment, right? And sometimes I'm like, man, I've been focusing on all of the wrong stuff, and I find those moments to be really recalibrating for myself as well. Yeah, yeah, Marshall. Mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We're going to talk about that too, and the importance of visitation is that you are visiting, presenting the gospel to far more people than you think you are, right? And again, sometimes that can be awkward when you're not even sure if the resident is conscious or aware, and it can feel weird in those moments. And you have family, you don't know who's outside the door listening. And actually, they're probably more aware of things than you realize. And so you just are there to be that faithful presence in ministry. And you're right. I mean, it's one of the things that drew me into the chaplaincy was actually at first not so much the residents, but coming out of COVID was the workers and just how burnt out, calloused, hardened that they had to be to preserve themselves in those moments, right? But that needs ministry to soften and to come back and to be tender and compassionate and caring in the first place. And so when you come to visit, every interaction that you have really needs to be viewed as a gospel moment, a moment where you can share the love of Christ. And because we're going to have people like that, like what's the point? And you get to share, there's always hope, right? And we can just share the love of Christ to more than just that person that you're visiting. So I want to share a few more thoughts looking at our time here today. The title of the class we simply went with is the least of these. And of course, it comes from the well-known passage of Christ. And I'm going to just read it, Matthew 25, 35 through 40. And then I want to share a few things that we can learn from the life and the ministry of Jesus that we need to use as our motivation, our foundation for visitation, okay? But Christ was teaching, and he says this, "For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." And then the righteous will answer him and saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me." Of course, Jesus is speaking of many scenarios, but specifically he mentioned there the visiting of those who are sick. There's a Greek word that Jesus uses there, and it is episkeptomai, and it refers to visiting someone, assessing their well-being, meeting their needs. It's used 11 times throughout the New Testament, and nearly half of them is actually referring to something that God does for us, right? Something that God does for us, and I think that's really interesting. It's something the Lord does for us, but then he invites us to do that for others. It's something we receive from the Lord, and then we are to be conduits of that ministry and to be that towards those that we encounter. So why visitation ministry? Well, because the Lord has first cared for and visited and met with us, right? That's what he's done for us. And so we are to do these things for one another. And I think that our failure to do so demonstrates that perhaps we don't fully comprehend, we don't fully appreciate the condition that we were in when the Lord came and he cared for us and he met us. Even a quick reading of the gospel begins with astonishment at the types of people that Jesus associated with. In fact, that was one of the greatest weapons that his enemies used against him. He came for the needy, and in particular, he came for those who were lost and those who were helpless. And Jesus himself said that he came to heal the sick, not the well. And he had come for the outcasts. And so Jesus reached out to needy people. He was unrestricted. He was unrestrained. He relieved them of their burdens. He didn't first pause to consider their ancestry or their background or their social status. Like whoever they were, Jesus accepted them. And as such, the ministry of visitation means that we too need to accept the patient, the resident, the family, the staff, whoever they are and whatever their background or need may be. We need to come in to accept them. A theology of acceptance means we meet people where they are in whatever mood that we find them in, okay? And that can be a challenging one. I'll tell you, in a facility like ours, there's some moods. There's a little bit of grumpiness, right? But I'm like, I get it. Like, you're tired. You don't want to be here, of course. What else would I expect of you? Right? But we meet them where they are. We listen to what they have to say without being judgmental. They have any number of emotions that surface at the time of visit. They might have anger and frustration and fear and hopelessness, and we need to work to help them feel safe enough to share those things with us in those visits. The moment that we start to criticize or we start to invalidate those genuine feelings is the same moment that we're inviting that person to now withdraw from us and offer insincere responses. Okay, so we need to come in with acceptance. Another thing I want to offer today is a theology of availability. Matthew also tells us that Jesus, when he was told of the death of his cousin, John the Baptist, he went by boat to the other side of the lake. And presumably this was, he's trying to escape the crowds, like he wants to be alone. He wants to grieve. And we read there that the crowds followed him around the lake, and Jesus just uses that actually as a moment to teach them and to heal like the entire day. And at the end of that exhausting day is that moment when all the people are tired and they're hungry and they had that long journey back home. And it would have been easy for Jesus to have just simply dismissed them and to pursue the privacy that he was trying to get in the first place, right? But instead, we get the incredible story where he feeds the crowds with those 5 loaves and 2 fish. And Jesus, in spite of the circumstances, made himself available to people who had physical and medical and spiritual needs. The ministry of Jesus' life then is a call for his disciples of all ages to be ready, to be available to people, even when it is at cost and inconvenience to yourself. It will cost. It shouldn't be easy to make a visit. You're like, I got things going on. Of course you do. But that's part of the ministry. To be available, to be present for someone in need doesn't simply mean being in the same room either, just sitting there. You need to be 100% there for that person. We can't be preoccupied with what we're going to do when we leave or what we were doing before we came. To be available is to make our whole selves available with complete concentration and attention. They have to have your focus. They deserve that. Then we have a theology of accountability. The Gospels record Jesus' startlingly dramatic words spoken after Peter's confession of him as the Messiah. And those words, which he reiterated several times later, stated plainly how he must suffer and die and rise again. And the disciples tried to dissuade Jesus from going to Jerusalem. Like, well, just don't go. And he was determined. Why? Because he's the good shepherd. And he was responsible for the safety of the sheep. As a shepherd, accountable of the sheep for their security. And in that sense, when we are called to a visitation, we need to accept a similar sense of accountability to God for those that have been entrusted to us in this ministry. Again, you're aware of somebody that needs a visit. You may be the only visit they get. And we kind of gloss over that or we brush it off. No, we need to accept accountability and say, if not me, who? Right? A half-hearted or an indifferent commitment to visitation is not going to suffice. They'll see right through that. Oh, you don't really want to be here. You're just crossing it off your list. They can sense that. You can sense that when someone treats you that way. Jesus also showed compassion and concern and empathy with everybody that he dealt with, right? And he's continually moved to compassion by the crowds. There's a verse in Matthew chapter 9 where we are told this blatantly. It says, Jesus saw the crowds and he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. But the principal characteristic of Jesus' ministry was this persistence in completing the task of caring. And that same concern should be the characteristic when you are visiting someone as well. So this theology of persistent care means that we keep checking in, even when others have stopped. And so I know that was one of our concerns. They're like, am I on the hook? Yes, you are a little bit. You keep checking in when others have stopped. I have found that friends often rush in to help when things first go awry, but over time, many stop staying in touch. If you've ever lost a loved one, you've experienced this. Those initial days of grief, yes, they're sad and they're sorrowful, but you have a lot of support. And I have found maybe it's 6 months, a year later, that support, people have gone back to their lives and you still can't. You still have that void, that loss. And that's often when grief can hit you like a truck all over again, right? You got to keep checking in even when others have stopped. Maybe people are assuming that other people are visiting or offering support, but very few people really stay connected months afterward. And that's tragic and ironic because that's often actually when the need really increases. And by the way, the most caring, most effective action that you can take in a visitation is to pray with them. Pray with them. Pray consistently for your friends, not only for their physical needs, of course, strength and healing and reprieve from pain, but also pray for their emotional and their spiritual needs too. And when someone shares their prayer request, pray with them, like right away, right there if possible. Not only is that going to reinforce that you genuinely care for them, but it's also going to ensure that you really do pray. I think we've all been there, like, I'll pray for you, and then like, I forgot, right? So just pray with them. We're going to talk a little bit more in a future session what that practically looks like and to give a listening ear and trying to understand what the person we are visiting with is going through. But when we visit someone, we need to give them our full attention. Simple things like eye contact, appropriate responses, clarifying questions at the right time show that we care. And looking at our time, I'm just going to kind of quickly go through a remainder of these here. We have a theology of sensitivity. It can be easy to recognize some needs. It is something altogether different to be sensitive to the other seemingly insignificant needs that ultimately may be the most important to the person. Okay? Jesus delved below the surface to understand the innermost feelings. He observed the most camouflaged of needs. I think of the shame and the remorse and the disgust that Peter felt after he denied Christ. And yet what does Jesus do? He recognizes the need to forgive and to heal and to restore Peter. And we find that threefold affirmation on the beach later on, right? And in the same way, we need to be alert to needs, even if they are not at first apparent. Faithful friends weep with those who weep, as the Apostle Paul reminds us in Romans 12. They acknowledge how difficult the situation is. They let their sick friends vent for a time and then encourage them to put their hope in the Lord. They assure them that God is never going to leave them. They reassure them that their suffering will not be wasted. That when we care and when we are sensitive, we can avoid pitfalls and trite and cliche responses. We need to be careful that you don't just give those pat answers, those cliche comments when we're visiting and comforting and encouraging someone. Sometimes listening is the most comforting gift that we can give someone. Again, I know one of those fears is, I don't know what I'm going to say. That's okay. Maybe that's a hint. Don't say anything. Just go and listen. And actually, when you don't know what to say, I find that's a beautiful place to begin. I don't have the words for this moment, but I just really want to be with you. That's okay to say. Now, witness, we talked about this one. Witnessing takes on a lot of forms, and it can be through spoken word, of course. Often preaching is most effective, as we can see in the way that the crowds clung to the teaching of Christ. But it's also been true over the history of the church that many have been won to Christ by observing the life of a Christian. When we visit, we are to be seen as a light to all that we encounter. Marshall demonstrated that point clearly. It could be patients, residents, relatives, staff. And not so that people would be attracted to us, but that we can point them to Christ. The minute you step into that moment, into that building, you are to show the light of Christ, to be a witness. And because we're not trying to attract people to us, that means you're also free to be human. You're free to be human. You don't have to have all the answers. Like I was saying, you can admit, I don't understand why this is happening either. You can admit that you have fears, that you have doubts sometimes. You can identify with their feelings whenever you can truthfully. Now, I think one of those trite things, if I can offer, that we want to avoid is saying, I know exactly how you feel, right? I know just what you feel. No, you don't, right? We can't know that. We're all different people with different histories. But maybe it's a legitimate thing to say, I felt this particular way before. I don't know if that's similar, but I've felt something like this. And when we share our weakness, we share the strength of Christ. We're there to bear witness to his strength, to his grace in those moments. We're there to be servants. We see in Christ that his servanthood was offered to all without any fear, without any prejudice, without any conditions, without any fanfare. He showed no bias. His servanthood was unrestricted. He served Jews and Gentiles alike. But what I have found, regretfully, is that we can be rather selective in our visitation ministry. Oh, I know this person, I'll go to them. That'll be an easier visit for me. I don't know that one. That will be for someone else, right? And we kind of can be selective. It's far easier to visit someone with whom we have a natural rapport, someone with whom we have history, someone with whom we have friendship or at least some shared interest. And yet the others, let's just say who have maybe a less appealing personality, maybe a less appealing background, they go overlooked. And yet, friends, we need to remember, they're probably more in need of our visit than those otherwise well-supported people are. And Jesus sets for us the example that we should follow in his footsteps and be a servant of all. You're there for the patient's needs, not yours. One more that I want to offer here as we're at our time is love. Love is our motivation. Jesus reduced all of the law and all of the prophets down to the two commands, right? That is that we are to love God and we are to love our neighbor. Love is the base, it is the foundation of all true Christian ministry and service. And as such, love and empathy need to characterize the visit. If we do it simply out of duty, then all sense of warmth and spontaneity and integrity are going to be completely removed for the ministry. I'll share a really quick story. I wish this wasn't true, it was, but when I was serving in the church for a time, I remember we would kind of have people make visits, and one individual was making a visit, and the person who was visiting asked, "So why are you here?" And their answer simply was, "Because the pastor told me I had to visit you." It's like, wrong answer, right? That's duty. Even if that is partially true, you were informed by the pastor, that's why you're here? No, right? There's a difference between love and duty. As we're winding today's session down, the whole purpose behind visitation ministry is so that we can closely follow Jesus' lead. That we can develop first that proper theology that would help us to move forward with a proper approach and compassionate care. I have found making visits is daunting. It's scary. It's my job, and I'm terrified every time I'd have to do one. Every time I get that call for end-of-life support, just so you know, I still have no clue what I'm doing. No clue. Because every one of those moments is completely unique. And if I were to come into that saying, I know exactly what to do in this moment because I've done it 1,000 times before, I lose any sense of that love. It is a good thing that you walk in that moment and say, I'm a little scared. I don't really know what I'm doing here. Because that causes you to depend upon the Lord and to treat each person as an individual, because they are, to meet their needs. It's going to be inconvenient. It's going to be a bit of a burden. But when we put on the right theological lens, we can do it with confidence and not hesitation. We're reminded that we have a relevant God who meets us personally in our needs. We have a compassionate God who cares for the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. We have a compelling God with whom the visitor and his people can run toward in confidence. We have a suffering God, meaning he understands the situation better than you do. We have a patient God who bears with our imperfections and our stumbling as we try to serve him. We have an encouraging God who picks us up and he comforts us and he sends us right back into the fray. And so that is the foundation for biblically sound theology for a ministry of visitation. And I'm well over my time, so we're going to wrap up there. And then the next few weeks, we're going to look at, from there, how do we practically tackle this? We need to respond with compassion because, as Christ said, what you do for the least of these, you have done unto me. Let me just pray with you. Heavenly Father, we're profoundly grateful that you invite us into ministry, to be used by you, to meet the needs of those around us. So Lord, give us a deeper awareness of those that maybe we've overlooked, whether intentionally or unintentionally, that you would just burden our hearts for those who are in need of the ministry of presence. God, we confess that we have a lot of reservations and hesitations. We don't know what we're doing. We don't want to mess things up. We don't know what to say. We have busy schedules. And yet, Lord, we know the importance of this ministry to those whom we are visiting and for being the visitor. And so we ask that you would meet us in our insufficiencies and in our deficiencies, and that we would share the gospel effectively by being there with those who need you most. And all that we say and do, Lord, our desire is to bring you the honor and to bring you the glory. Help us to do that, even unto the least of these. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen. Thanks, friends. We'll see you next week.